Welcome, everybody, to the RotoWire Mixed Martial Arts Podcast. I'm Jake Letarski. This here is Jon Litterine. With me, as always, if you're out there on Twitter, give John a follow at JonLitterine. You can follow me at RotoJake. John, it's been forever, man. We haven't had a pay-per-view in a really long time, but today we're going to get together, break down, the main card of the biggest fights here at UFC 267. Jan Blachowicz, Glover Teixeira here. Big fight week here, but I guess we can backtrack a little bit and talk about that whole mess that was Vettori and Costa first.
Yeah, the whole thing was a disaster. The thing that I found odd and I guess a little disturbing was how essentially Paulo Costa in the middle of the week last week, I don't know if it was Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever it was, figured out he couldn't make weight. So he essentially said, I'm going to stop trying, and then just didn't feel like the least bit bad about it or anything. He's just like, yeah, well, me and my people and Vittori's people will come together on a contract and we'll do this, that, and the other thing. And that ended up happening, and, he ended up losing. But, like, the point that I'm trying to make is that the fact he just went along with the whole thing was, like, really weird. And he's a little bit of a different cat. He's a little bit out there. But now, he lost. He looks bad because he essentially missed weight twice. He couldn't make 185, and then they bumped it to like 195, and he couldn't make that.
Yeah, it was 195, and then the night before, before weigh-ins, okay, it's going to be light heavyweight now. It's 205.
Yeah, so he forfeited whatever it was, 20% of his purse or whatever to Vettori, and then he lost.
Yeah, should have been a lot more. I mean, technically, that's a 20-pound weight miss. I mean, come on.
Oh, yeah, Vettori probably could have got in for at least 30 if he tried. And then Dana White said moving forward, he's going to have to fight at light heavyweight, and, a lot of things Dana says don't stick, but we'll see.
I thought if he lost, maybe they'd cut him because he pretty much deserves that. But, given that whole unprofessionalism, but maybe that's a little bit of an extreme take. He's still a draw. The guy still hits hard. I mean, in the late rounds, I didn't think Costa would have anything left by rounds 4 or 5, but in the late rounds, he still landed a little bit.
He landed.
Vittori's got a crazy chin here, but
yes, he does.
Yeah, so we've got an interesting prospect in the middleweight division. Of course, it looks like we're gonna have Adesanya Whitaker in January or February, early 2022 is when that's gonna be. But before that, we've got back-to-back weekends of pay-per-views. Well, technically, this card isn't a pay-per-view, but we're with you anyway. It's UFC 267, not UFC Fight Island, or you could have called it something different because it is a non-traditional one. But this one will be live and available for everyone on ESPN Plus at no extra charge. And I'm thinking, man, some of the cards they've charged for have been much worse than this. So fight fans are really getting a treat. The trick is I believe it's like 9 Eastern or something like that. It's a 15-fight card, so it's huge. Chances are we're only going to talk about the main fights today, because chances are a lot of these are going to get dropped or adjusted, as that usually happens. But on the bright side, Fight Island has actually been pretty good to us in terms of keeping fights intact, as I furiously pound on wood for all the handicappers out there that are trying to make content this week. Fight Island, you have to get there 2 weeks early, and so a lot of positive tests would have already happened, and and then they kind of isolate you there on the island, and we're there. So really early one. Unfortunately going to have to compete with my Wisconsin Badgers, who have again given me false hope against Iowa because they control their destiny now. But I'm not going to kid myself and think they're suddenly going back to the Big Ten championship, and if they do. But anyway, it's going to be a 2-3 TV kind of Saturday morning here. Let's get into it, though, John. Light heavyweight championship, the real light heavyweight, a real light heavyweight fight. We've got Jan Blachowicz, Glover Teixeira. Blachowicz 9,000 on DraftKings, Teixeira 7,200. Blachowicz looking like a minus 300 favorite. Comeback on Teixeira plus 235. Odds to finish. Vegas really likes this one to finish minus 225. There's a lot going on here and a lot to take apart, and we'll talk about this as we go through all these fights. But there are a lot of really big lopsided favorites on the main card here, and you're gonna have to take your stand somewhere along these lines just to be able to get lineups. Maybe you find some plays and some leans on the undercard, but you're definitely gonna have to take your stand with an underdog or two. Is Glover Teixeira possibly a place that you'd make that stand with?
Yeah, so this is going to be an ongoing theme that we're going to talk about. There are a lot of lopsided DK salaries on the main card. Like you mentioned, this one is the first of a few we're going to talk about. Jan Blachowicz and Glover Teixeira have both won 5 fights in a row. Blachowicz won the UFC title about a year ago, September 2020, defeated Dominic Reyes. He defended it for the first time this past March, defeating Israel Adesanya in what has been Adesanya's only professional loss. Watching that fight, I wouldn't say Blachowicz looked great. I think it was a case of him just being bigger and stronger than Adesanya, and I think that primarily was the reason he ended up winning that fight. All things considered, I think Adesanya is a more talented fighter. But look, you can only go in there against who they put you up against, and Blachowicz successfully defended his title.
Adesanya barely cuts to get to middleweight. He probably walks around 190, and he didn't even get up to 205. It's a 20-pound. This is the biggest gap, between weight classes, really. Unless you heavyweight, but yeah. So he was cleared for the first. Adesanya's done a pretty good job defending takedowns over the course of his career. Surprised me, to say the least. I thought a good wrestler would eventually get to him, but it took not necessarily that Jan's this great wrestler, but just that he's so much more physically imposing and able to impose his will in the takedown game.
Yeah, he essentially just outmuscled Adesanya is pretty much what it comes down to. And look, I'm the first one to admit that I've been really, really light on Jan Blachowicz for almost his entire career. He's proven me wrong time and time again. He could walk away tomorrow and his UFC run would have been infinitely more effective than I ever would have imagined in my wildest dreams. He's been good. There's no way around it. This is an interesting fight because Glover Teixeira will be 42 years old this coming Thursday. So 2 days before the event takes place. And he deserves this chance. A lot of times we're talking about title fights these days where the UFC is low on options and thus somebody gets forced into a title fight. Glover has earned his chance. He's won 5 in a row. The competition's been fairly good. Thiago Santos, Anthony Smith, Nikita Krylov, Owan Kudalaba, and Carl Roberson. So he's done a good job. He's earned another opportunity. This is Glover's second shot at UFC Gold. He fought John Jones in April 2014 in Baltimore in a fight that I was actually at, and it was bad. You're talking Jones at probably the peak or near the peak of his career, and it was a lopsided rout. But Glover's worked his way back to the spot, and quite frankly, he deserves it. The age of Glover is definitely an issue. It would, even if Glover wins this fight and becomes champion, his advanced age is a major concern in terms of his staying power. I certainly wouldn't project him to make multiple successful title defenses, even if he does win.
I think he'd be an underdog in most light heavyweight fights.
Probably. Yeah. Look, he keeps himself in great shape. He's seen everything there is to see inside the octagon. He's going to show up ready to fight. From an offensive, stylistic standpoint, both guys have a bunch of power. That's one of the things was light on regarding Blachowicz. He has more power than I ever thought he did. More stopping power, I should say. The offensive striking numbers are similar. Blachowicz is slightly better at defending himself. Glover, back a couple years ago, I had real concerns about his chin. I was worried that it was starting to go, which is obviously a traditional concern for anybody who gets up there at that age. He's kind of quelled those concerns of late. Obviously, all it takes is one fight. If he gets knocked out by Blachowicz quickly at age 42, you're going to say that, the durability concerns are back. But, for at least for now, he seems to have put them in the rearview mirror. Yeah. If you want to get past the strike and go to the wrestling, I think Glover's probably a better wrestler. I think he's probably pound for pound stronger than Blachowicz is, although you wonder if the age differential plays into any part there. Essentially, anything Glover does inside the octagon is going to be scrutinized to some point because of his age. And you wonder if he performs badly, well, that's because he's getting up there in age. If he performs well, then the concern comes, well, can he continue performing well at his advanced age? So that's going to be a concern no matter what. I think Glover, I'm picking Blachowicz to win, but like you mentioned earlier, a lot of these fights on the main card are lopsided. I think Glover has definite tournament value from a DraftKings standpoint at $7,200. I'm not as confident in Blachowicz as his salary would lead you to believe. Part of that probably has something to do with the fact that I've consistently underrated him and he continues to prove me wrong. But I think at a minimum, I think you're probably going to get a better effort from Glover than his $7,200 price tag will lead you to believe. I don't think there's $1,800 in salary gap between the two.
Yeah, so the thing with Glover is there are a lot of MMA handicappers out there that have won a ton of money with Glover over the last couple of years of him fighting, because he pretty much always comes in as an underdog or close to it, and he's been coming through over and over again. He's a big underdog against Thiago Santos, Misha Serkinov, he closed as a dog. Anthony Smith, I think he was even a dog too. He was barely the favorite, or they were pick'ems against Krylov, Kudilaba, Robertson. All of those were wins. I mean, there's his recent run of win streaks. So I mean, he clearly has been able to produce as an underdog before. And the other thing is, we talk about his chin, but in both the Santos and the Smith fights, I thought Glover was out on his feet. I thought he was done. He took huge shots in both of those fights, but somehow managed to, hang around, grab onto his opponent, shoot for the takedown. And I mean, with Santos, I believe, Santos, he was rocked early in that fight, but he weathered the storm, and then he turned around and he got the submission, and then he ended up. And then Smith was more, after he recovered in that one, it was more of a take him down, ground and pound type situation here. So, could Glover? I mean, does he have the chin to outlast Jan? I mean, when you stack up Jan's power with someone like Thiago, who do you give the edge there to? It's probably pretty close. It's a really tough one for me. I mean, in the end, I'm picking Jan. I think Jan's just a little bit better at all, stages of the game at this point. Maybe not so much submissions. What I could see Glover taking a path to victory if it gets to be in later rounds and Jan starts to tire out and Glover finds a way to take his back. That's really the only outcome I could see. I think Jan's got a good enough chin that, Glover's not going to walk him down and knock him out. It has to be, some kind of deep water, I don't want to say greasy, but like, a submission in deep water is kind of how I see Glover getting it done if he's going to. However, that being said, like I said, I'm picking Jan too. I'll talk about this a few times on the show, but we just started up a new survivor pool where you have to pick 3 of any fighters for any event. And I'm picking Jan in this fight as one of my 3 selections, over some guys that we'll talk about later on the card, when we start to get into confidence ratings here. We all know MMA is a mass entry sport, right? To be successful, you need to account for variance, and you shouldn't be thinking of, is this fighter going to win or lose? Like, you have to be thinking, am I going to be more confident in this fighter winning or losing than the rest of the field, and then adjust my exposure accordingly here. So, obviously, if you're mass entering, you need to have a good chunk of share, just because, like we said, there are a ton of fighters over 9,000 in salary on this card. I mean, let me see here. What do we have? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 fighters, 9,000 or above. If you want to get some of these big high salary guys in your lineups, you have to take a stand somewhere. And does Glover have a shot? Yeah, sure. But I think Jan, in the streak he's on, being a little bit younger helps. He's got the 2-inch reach advantage. He's looked, insanely good lately. He's been a pretty high DraftKings scorer lately as well, getting stoppage bonuses or performance of the night against Reyes and Corey Anderson. And we've kind of seen what Corey Anderson has done since moving over to Bellator. I'm not too crazy about the Jacare or the Rockhold wins. Those don't mean a ton to me, but you can see his evolution, how in February of 2019, he was finished by Thiago Santos. And then he comes back out, and actually, no, they never did do that rematch. Never mind. I was mixing him up with the other guy. Everyone fights everyone in this division. Yes, but anyway, yeah. The point I'm trying to make is that, statistically across the board, striking offense, striking defense, his takedown defense, 65% is fine. They fight at the same weight class. I'm going to say Jan is more. He's more sound, I guess physically, I want to say. So there are just too many. I just don't see, again, only seeing that one narrow path to victory for Glover isn't really enough for me to pick him outright. But could he do it? Absolutely. And at 7,200, there's a lot of lineup flexibility there. So there are definitely some Glover lineup combinations here that are going to work out.
Yeah, I mean, this is the end result of what happens when you have a card with 15 fights on it. Simply, you can't make a contest unless you spread the salaries out. So, you're going to have to figure it out one way or another.
Yeah, I love the line in your article, I guess Khabib's the only person this doesn't apply to, but Father Time is essentially undefeated here. And I'll go ahead and pick, for Jan to knock out the streak Jan is on and the excellence lately. I don't know if it's a camp change or if something just clicked with the technique, but he's been able to find his spots and land big shots.
He's looked great. There's no doubt about it.
I'm going Jan all the way. I'm picking him in Survivor. Definitely picking him for the website. We did have, I'll do staff picks on Thursday. We did have one pick for Teixeira come in already, so that'll be interesting. But I think that's all there is to say against this fight. I mean, Teixeira has made people tons of money as a dog, but I think that trend finally stops here because Jan's proven me wrong. He's the real deal, and I think he's going to continue to get it done, and he'll probably get it done in pretty devastating fashion here. We got another one. Let's go to the co-main event, the other belt being given away here. We got Petr Yan and Corey Sandhagen. Of course, originally supposed to be Petr Yan and Aljamain Sterling. Sterling's got neck issues, so he dropped out. Sandhagen's coming off a loss, albeit a very controversial decision against TJ Dillashaw, but Sandhagen was ready for this fight, so they brought him in. But Yan is rightfully the favorite, minus 235. Come back on Sandhagen, plus 190. Yan is an $8,800 fighter on DraftKings, so a little bit cheaper than Blachowicz. Sandhagen, $7,400. Odds to finish has been pretty much a pick-em. I've got minus 110 here. I don't think that's changed a ton. I guess it depends on your book. We're talking about DraftKings mostly, so I guess we'll go with them. They're minus 110, and that's pretty much the consensus here, which, in Vegas terms, that's basically a pick 'em for finishing this fight here. But there's a lot to dive into here, Jon. I'll let you start and take it away with how you see this one going.
Well, Petr Yan would still be the UFC bantamweight champion. He fought Aljamain Sterling in March. Yan was cruising to a victory, and I mean not even remotely close. Sterling had nothing. At which point, late in the fourth round, Yan crushed Sterling with an illegal knee right to the head. It was about as blatant a foul as you'll ever see. Yan was disqualified for it, rightfully so. It was bad, and it cost him his title. Like you mentioned, two were supposed to have a rematch here. Aljamain has some neck issues he's going through. He couldn't go, so Corey Sandhagen gets the call. I was wrong about the Sterling fight. I thought he would take care of Yan. I thought that Aljamain, who's bigger and constantly moving, would give Yan all sorts of issues. But what we've seen with Yan is not only are his hands ridiculously fast, but he's a volume puncher, and he can get away with it because his chin is ridiculous. He is another guy, kind of like there's a little, kind of like a little bit like Glover, obviously on a smaller scale, and he's much younger, but he can continue to push forward because he's confident he can absorb a strike from his opponent. There's legitimate high-end staying power here for Yan because he's only just 28 years old. Like, this is a guy who is good enough and young enough that I could see him winning this fight and then fighting Sterling again eventually and beating him and then defending his belt 5-6 times. Like, he's that good, and he has youth on his side.
Even in a division that is absolutely loaded, I do think
it's definitely one of the deepest divisions in the sport, especially the UFC. Yeah. Like you mentioned, Corey Sandhagen's coming off a loss. We've talked about this many times. Putting a guy right in a title fight after a loss looks bad, but the original fight here obviously fell apart. So the UFC wanted, create an interim title and do whatever it is they got to do. Sandhagen fought TJ Dillashaw, which was the return of Dillashaw this past July after his, long PED suspension. I thought Sandhagen won that fight. I think if you go to MMA decisions, which charts all the majority of the media members who vote, I think most of them had Sandhagen winning that fight. But again, the optics are that you have a guy who lost his last fight and is 2-2 in his last 4 fights fighting for a UFC title. The UFC doesn't take these things into consideration when they book fights, but it's just something to keep in mind. The big thing here is the size differential between the two. Corey Sandhagen's 4 inches taller. I think when they're going to get into the octagon, it's going to seem like even more than that. You look at fights sometimes and you say, wow, this guy looks like he's literally twice that guy's size. I think that's kind of how you're going to feel when you see this fight. And this is going to be a challenge for Petr Yan because this is the first time he's facing an opponent in the UFC who's bigger than he is. Jan's pretty big for the division, but my guess is even against the bigger opponent for the first time, I don't think he's going to change much. He's a volume guy, constantly pushing forward, constantly pressuring his opponent. I don't think facing an opponent who's larger than he is will make a difference.
You think he'll go to the takedown, to try to make up for some of that distance?
He could, but Sandhagen's sneaky on his back. We've seen that before. He's sneaky on the ground in general. Yeah. So, that's a risk. I think Jan probably has more confidence in his chin and his ability to just win a kickboxing match against most anybody. That's probably where he's going to lean. But, like you mentioned, that's an option. Jan averages more than 2 takedowns per 15 minutes, which when you have a guy who lands almost exactly 6 significant strikes per minute, 5.99, and can still take you down over more than 2 times every 15 minutes. It's a ridiculous combination.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, Dillashaw took Sandhagen down twice and ended up with more than 8 minutes of control time, and clearly the judges valued that a ton because they ended up giving the fight to Dillashaw. So,
it's definitely something to have in your
plan that works, or that has worked at least.
And it's especially important in a 5-round fight, in which if you're worried that you lost a round or something and you see a fight, maybe a fight might go the distance and you just want to bank around late with the takedown, it certainly becomes more impactful in a fight that's 25 minutes instead of 15 minutes. The ultimate breakdown for me is kind of like the first fight we talked about. It's kind of like the Teixeira-Bukovic fight. I think Sandhagen is probably undervalued at 7,400. I think it's going to be a really long time, if ever, that you try and pick up Sandhagen and you ever see his price tag that low. But this is the end result of a card that has 15 fights and a bunch of lopsided fights on the main card from a salary standpoint. I think he's competitive, just like I think Glover is going to be competitive in the main event. But again, I still don't think it's enough to win. I think this is I'm probably more than 50-50 that Jan is at the point where he probably just going to win this fight, beat Sterling again, and then have multiple title defenses. I think he's that good.
Oh, he's going to have to.
Yeah, eventually, I'm sure. But I really do think there's, obviously, even we both think even if Glover were to win, you're not looking at a guy who's going to be a champion for God. I don't even know if I'd set the over-under at a year. Probably less than that.
Well, to backtrack, so Jiri Prochazka is coming in to weigh in as an alternate, right? So if something were to happen to Glover or Jan, Jiri could step in and save that fight. Whoever wins, maybe I could see Jan being a slight favorite over Jiri, but if Glover wins, he'll definitely be an underdog again.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Jiri's a young, up-and-coming kid. Hits like a ton of bricks. If you've never watched a Jiri fight, do yourself a favor and look him up on Fight Pass or ESPN. But no, that guy's crazy. But anyway, no, I got to get back to the Sandhagen Jan. I don't want to sidetrack too much here. I'm seeing a lot of similar analysis to you. Sandhagen, to his credit, not granted it hasn't been wins in all of these fights, but he's fought a murderer's row. After UFC 267, he'll have fought Jan. And before that, TJ Dillashaw, Marlon Moraes, Frankie Edgar, Aljamain Sterling. That's all in a span of Aaron Bronstetter from TSN tweeted this. That's all in a span of 511 days and Asunciao before that. So, you got to hand it to Corey Sandhagen. He's not backing down from anybody. And that's how you have to play it in such a stacked division here. And the striking is interesting because Jan can get hit. I saw a little bit of debate going around on MMA Twitter today where, one of our old colleagues tweeted the round-by-round numbers from the Sterling fight. And in round 1, Sterling had the significant strike edge, 27-14. In round 2, Sterling, 17-10. In round 3, it was Jan, 30-29. And round 4, Jan, 32-24. So it was closer there. But that doesn't MMA, someone made the great point that, MMA it's not necessarily always a stats and analytical driven because those numbers don't tell the whole story. Jan was definitely landing the bigger shots in that fight. There was no question who was winning those rounds and who was well on his way to winning that fight. So, in what was basically a kickboxing match, I shouldn't say that entirely because Jan got takedowns too, in this one, but, so he was getting outlanded, and so you can make a case, if you really wanted to twist it, that Sandhagen with that height and reach advantage, and he'll want to keep things standing too, I presume. Jan has a 90% takedown defense. I don't think Sandhagen's going to try to take him down. And then, one of the only outside of that split decision to TJ Dillashaw, his other loss was Sterling taking Sandhagen down, taking his back, and ending it in 90 seconds, which was, a little bit surprising there, I thought. But no, Sandhagen is a very good fighter, also very young, pretty close to a complete martial artist. The takedown defense, 65%, And, I mentioned that because, Dillashaw had success in that area. Maurice even took him down once. Rafael Asunciao took him down 4 times. And Sandhagen was taken down in all. He started off 5-0, but he was taken down at least once in every single one of those fights. So he can be taken down if that's something that Jan wants to do. I think Jan is a decent enough grappler that, he'll be able to avoid the triangles and stuff that Corey will want to throw up from his back, and he'll want to go to that grounded pound early because he's a lot easier to hit when he's right in front of you. So, I mean, in the end, it's very similar to the main event. I'm going to pick Jan. I think he, despite the height and reach disadvantages here that are definitely substantial, I think he's got the chin. I think he's going to find his way inside, and I would almost give him a speed advantage. I mean, those long limbs take a little longer to connect sometimes. So I'm going to go Jan across the board here. There are too many ways that he could win this fight. I could see him subbing him. I could see him ground and pound, or I could see him landing a crazy shot. Jan's going to definitely chop at those legs. I definitely watch for that to come. I could see that, for sure. Looking in the Sterling fight, he didn't go to the legs too heavily in the Sterling fight. 4, 3, 6, and 4 significant strikes to the legs in those 4 rounds there. So it was definitely part of his game plan. A lot of those strikes are at a distance. I don't want to go too far into the numbers and overcomplicate that. This is Jan for me, and I'm pretty confident in it, but I also did not pick him in the survivor pool because Sandhagen, he's legit, and he's going to be hanging around in this top tier of the division for many years to come, win or lose on Saturday.
Yeah, I think the big thing is if there's, for some reason, which I don't expect, but if for some reason Jan just has a problem with the longer frame of Sandhagen, I don't think that's going to be the case. But there are fights we see where a guy who is the smaller of the two does have problems getting inside and just landing consistently. Now, you think Jan would be more aggressive than the average fighter because of the confidence he has in his chin. Mm-hmm. But, it's something to keep an eye on. We have seen it before, but I don't expect it to happen.
Yeah. Jan has long been one of my favorite prospects, and I'm just going to take him to win this and to reign for quite a while. Let's move on, though. We've got one of the biggest, let's see, is it the biggest favorite on the card in Islam Makachev?
Yes, certainly one of them.
He's pretty close with another fight that we're going to talk about. But yes, Islam Makachev is the biggest favorite on the entire card. He is going to be taking on Dan Hooker on a pretty quick turnaround.
Very quick
turnaround, which, crazy impressive. Dan Hooker. I'll just do that side note right away. He had like 2 days to get to Vegas for that Nasrat Haqparast fight.
Yep.
And still made the weight. Both of those guys had visa problems. They had to basically plead to their embassies to get in there. And then he came in and he made lightweight, no problem on 48 hours, and then came out and, looked dominant. He got the job done. So, hats off to Dan Hooker here. And this was supposed to be Islam Makachev and Rafael Dos Santos. Dos Santos had a drop, but Hooker, going back to Australia, I guess he's just going to head straight to Fight Island and take on a very, very tough task. A lot of people think Islam Makachev is a future champion and potentially the best that the lightweight division has to offer here. But let's look at the numbers. Makachev 9,600, most expensive on the card. Hooker 6,600. Definitely some salary relief there if you think he's got a puncher's chance. Makachev minus 650, comeback on Hooker plus 450. Odds to finish, kind of another pick'em here. We've got minus 110, which again, by Vegas standard, I've seen it's anywhere from minus 110 to plus 110. So I'm just going to go ahead and call that a pick'em, depending on it's going to vary across which book you shop here. But obviously, Vegas odds makers think this is something Makachev will run away with. Do you think that A, he'll run away with this fight, and B, can he live up to such a high price tag?
Man, first of all, Dan Hooker is an animal, regardless of what happens. Like, he deserves an insane amount of credit. I don't care if he loses in 12 seconds, for just doing this. And the other thing is, Dan Hooker, I think we're in agreement, is considerably better than Rafael Dos Santos at this stage of his career. So if you're looking at it that way, this is also a much better fight. Look, this is not just for Dan Hooker, but anybody fighting Islam Makachev. It's just a big, big, big ask. He's teammates with Ricardo Ramos, or used to be, I guess now, who we spoke about a little earlier. There are a lot of people who are really smart and know a lot about this sport who think Islam Makhachev's the best lightweight in the world today. he's certainly, without question, one of the best wrestlers in the world today. He's averaging 3.31 takedowns per 15 minutes. But what's crazy to me is that he connects on 65% of his attempts, which is a ridiculously high number.
He gets a hold of you and just doesn't let go, and there's no escaping.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. It's kind of like Khabib in that sense, where his positioning doesn't have to be right. He doesn't have to be under your butt with his arms wrapped around. He doesn't need to be in that perfect position. He just has this rare, unique ability, and I mean, not just an ability, it's a talent, to get you to the mat, even if his entry is subpar. It's what Khabib excelled at for years, and it's what Makachev is great at. The fact they train together, is no coincidence. Islam Makhachev was knocked out by Adriano Martins in his second UFC fight. Ooh. That was fluky. It felt fluky at the time. Many years later, it looks even more fluky now than it did then. He's won 8 fights in a row since, has not been challenged in any of them. Dan Hooker is the bigger man. He's 2 inches taller. He has a 5-inch reach edge. He's going to have to use all of it because he's going to have to try and beat up Islam on the feet. I like Hooker's chances in a kickboxing match. If you told me that he was going to be able to keep this standing for 15 minutes, the odds of that are small. Now, look, Dan Hooker had a problem with his takedown defense early in his UFC career. He was taken down at least twice in 4 of his first 6 fights with the company. That has not happened since. His takedown defense is now up to 80%, which is excellent. We usually say anything above 70 is solid. Above 80 is excellent. Hooker is a popular fighter. I mean, how can you not love the guy for, doing something like this? He's very well respected. And the fact he finds himself such a massive underdog is a direct correlation to how high people are on Makachev. I don't want to say Dan Hooker has no chance because he's a talented guy. But the problem here, as far as I can see, is the second Dan Hooker finds himself on his back, I have no idea how he's going to get back to his feet. And Makachev knows where his bread is buttered. He's one of those guys, and we say this all the time too. If you're a wrestler and you fail, we talked about it recently with Marina Rodriguez. If you fail on your first and second takedown attempts, a lot of guys get frustrated. They get away from it. Makachev, like Dvalishvili, even if you fail on 1 or 2 or 3, 4, 5, and 6 are coming. And it's a huge thing in a fight like this where he has such a big advantage in one area. It's just that Dan Hooker has no margin for error. If Makachev gets on the mat, I think he's probably essentially done for the round. In a 3-round fight, that's, a huge problem, obviously. And to give you an idea of how much time Islam Makhachev spends controlling his opposition, he averages 2.24 significant strikes landed a minute, which is nothing. I mean, that's like almost as low as you'll see. He absorbs 0.77 significant strikes a minute. He gets hit with less than 1 strike every minute, which is impossible, literally, if you're on the feet. But if he's controlling you from top position, this is the end result. His defense is fantastic because he's never in a position to be in a kickboxing match with his opponent. Look, I like Dan Hooker. I really respect him for doing this. This is a fight against the killer. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it was, after he just fought another good opponent. But it just seems like too big an ask for me. However, I do like, if you can get this fight, even at minus 110, I don't hate it. But if you can get this fight going the distance at plus money, I actually like that a lot. Because if Makachev does control this fight with his wrestling, I would not be the least bit shocked if Dan Hooker saw the final bell. Like, he might not get much offense from the bottom. He might be controlled for 12 out of 15 minutes. But I see no reason he can't see the final bell.
Yeah. So I'm with you here. I'm picking Makachev too, because how could you not? I mean, Hooker, he's got the big height and reach advantages. A little bit lanky sometimes. I think Makachev's going to be able to find trips and and take care of his business, grind out a boring decision. I don't really like using Makachev on DraftKings because I think Hooker's tough enough and intelligent enough to not put himself in a situation where he's giving up his back necessarily, and I could see it going the distance. You're right. So I don't think you're going to see a ton of value. I mean, geez, to get 12x on Makachev, I guess with the control time bonuses now, maybe you could sneak up there, but it's a tough ask at 9,600 to hit value. I mean, this is prime Bones, prime Valentina, prime Nunes price tag here. So and it's only a 3-round fight it's here, so you're gonna have a tough time there. But I still think Makachev grinds out a boring decision, like most people are expecting. However, I'm going to take a moment, hopefully not too long, to make my case for Hooker just for the heck of it, play a little devil's advocate. I actually did not use Hooker despite him being I did not use Makachev despite him being the biggest favorite on the card. I did not use him as one of my 3 survivor pool selections, and I'm going to tell you why. Number one, because I figure everyone's going to take Makachev. If Hooker can land a big hook, if Hooker can throw a brutal knee on one of Islam's entries and he gets that, I'm gaining a ton of leverage on the field where everyone else is getting the strike and I'm not. So, I've got that going here. But two, there are a couple other reasons where you could think that maybe Hooker's a little bit underpriced. One of them is resume to me. I mean, so Islam Makachev, tons of respect over this big 8-fight winning streak, but his last 5 were Thiago Moises, Drew Dober. Drew Dober's good. Davey Ramos, Armin Saryukin, and Cajun Johnson, Gleason Tebow. It's not necessarily murderer's row here, and he's gotten this is one of his biggest tests in the lightweight division here. So that's interesting to me. Meanwhile, Hooker, before the Haqparast fight, he took back-to-back losses to Michael Chandler and Dustin Poirier, Paul Felder, Eli Quinta, James Vick, Edson Barbosa. He's been fighting, just studs at this weight class for pretty much the entirety of his career, from 2018 onwards. So I do like the resume for Hooker, just a little bit better. Granted, he's got some losses in there, but he's quite possibly seen it all. 2, you got Hooker's 80% takedown defense. Now, whenever you see a number like that, you have to consider who it's been up against. And, all those guys I named off, none of them have wrestling at their absolute forefront necessarily. So you can say, yeah, 80% takedown defense is good, but nobody has 80% takedown defense against Islam Makachev. I mean, historically, his opponents have been 35%.
Yeah, so it's a different level.
Yeah, it's comparing apples and oranges there. So you throw that out a little bit. But I don't know. I think there's at least a chance Hooker catches him. And if you're mass entering, you have to sprinkle a little bit of Hooker in your GPPs, I think, because that's really the only way you're going to get leverage on the field. I mean, granted, there are 15 fights, so there are more opportunities than not. But yeah, I don't know. I think that there's a slight chance that Hooker could get him. I wouldn't be totally shocked. Hooker's been, arguably a little bit more active of late. Makachev had those 2 years off, and now he's kind of just starting, his run again, with the Dober and Moises, whereas, again, Hooker's facing all these killers. So yeah, I don't want to underrate Hooker here. I think that there's a chance, and he's crazy tough. Now, I always go back, whenever we talk about Hooker, I go back to the Edson Barbosa fight that I attended in person. He took body kick after body kick after body kick, and it was just like, it was the craziest sound in the stands, and it would just make you cringe every single time. Now, it's a different kind of pain that Makachev's going to put on you. It's going to be smothering. He's going to try to, limit your breathing and essentially make it so you can't breathe. But Hooker's resiliency is definitely, I mean, I'm not worried about Makachev getting, a one-punch knockout or anything like that. And that's how, a couple of the, at least the Chandler fight went with Hooker, So Hooker's a resilient guy. And we know the city kickboxing deal. Israel Adesanya is never going to be an offensive wrestler. But I over and over again, I would pick against Adesanya because, this guy's going to be able to get them to the ground. This person's going to be able to wrestle him. And the city kickboxing guys work that takedown defense pretty well. And I'm sure they have a game plan. Everyone has a game plan for Makachev like this, but I'm giving Hooker a chance here. I can't pick him outright, but I'm giving him a little bit of a chance, and I think he's got enough of a chance that I didn't worry about him in Survivor.
Yeah, I mean, Makachev, it's just spending 9,600 on a guy who averages 2.4 significant strikes landed per minute leaves you very, very, very little room for error. Mm-hmm. Like, I understand how good he is. And like the takedowns and the control time, you're not using him for, to rack up big striking numbers. But we see a lot of wrestlers who make a killing from hammering their opponents from top position if they're a wrestler. And that's not really Makachev's game. Like, he'll control you and you won't get up. But like, there's not insane ground and pound coming that you see for some other guys. So it's just, it's a small room for error.
more of a cash game play than a GPP play, because to get 12x on 9,600, which is kind of what you need for GPPs, that's going to be tough for Makachev to get, and I don't necessarily see that happening with his style of fighting. Even you would have to get an early knockout or submission, and his submissions come later from wearing you down, and he doesn't really get those early knockouts here. So anyway, we've dwelled on this fight a really long time. Let's get through a couple of these other ones a little bit quicker here. We've got a heavyweight matchup. Got to throw a heavyweight on there. Alexander Volkov, Marcin Tibura. Volkov 8,900, Tibura 7,300. Volkov is a -300 favorite. Comeback on Tibura plus 255. Odds to finish are only -130. So I would have thought a little bit higher in a heavyweight fight, but it is what it is. What are your thoughts on this one?
This is probably the fight on the main card that does the least for me. It's kind of just there. Like, some of the other ones have really good storylines and stuff. This one, Alexander Volkov, I've been a fan of for quite a while. He's 6'7". He's an elite kickboxer, and he moves better than you would think for a guy with his size. He still got hammered by Cyril Gane in June, who's going to fight Francis Ngannou for the title. So, losing to Cyril, it is what it is. He's might even be favored over Ngannou. We're close to it when those two fight. So I'm going to give Volkov a pass for that one. Tibura also fought in June, knocked out Walt Harris. Tibura's won 5 fights in a row. The last 2 were, via knockout. It's not pretty a lot of times with Tibura. He's getting up there in age. He'll be 36 in a couple weeks. He doesn't really have a background of defeating higher end fighters. He's generally struggled against better competition. There are some concerns about his chin. Look, he's a solid heavyweight, certainly better than the fringe roster guys he's been beaten up. But I would like to see him really succeed and perform well against, a better opponent, which Volkov certainly qualifies as. This is really, from a stylistic standpoint, this is your typical striker, grappler battle. Volkov, like I mentioned, a high-level kickboxer, really tall, long guy, lots of kicks. He's, very good in the stand-up. Tibura, from a grappling standpoint, 1.67 takedowns per 15 minutes. Volkov's takedown defense is 67%, which isn't great, but he's such a big, tall guy that I think he's more difficult to get to the mat than that 67% number would indicate. Everything seems about right to me. I thought the salaries were a little lopsided when I first thought about it. The more I thought about it, it seems right. Volkov's going to have such a big advantage on the feet.
Yeah. I want to say one thing about the 67% takedown defense. Curtis Blades took him down 14 times.
Right. So if you take that
the whole thing.
Right, take that out of the equation.
It happened. We can't deny that. He took him down, got taken down 14 times in a 5-round fight. But, that thing's probably right about around 80-90% if you throw it.
Right. And, Tibura is a good, solid grappler and a decent wrestler, but he certainly doesn't have the physicality or the explosion of the athleticism that Blades does. So, I pick Volkov in this fight. This is actually probably, I guess we'll talk about that in a minute, but this is one of the fights on the main card I probably feel best about. I like Volkov at 8,900. I think there's a lot of volume there. As long as he can stay upright, I don't really see how Tibura is going to slow down all his kicks and all that kind of stuff. So, I'll take, certainly could see Tibura seeing the final bell. That wouldn't shock me in the least, but, I'll take Volkov probably via decision.
Yeah, I'll keep this brief. Volkov's younger, height and reach advantages, better striking volume, much better striking accuracy, gets hit less. The only place it doesn't necessarily go his way is in the grappling department, but the strength of record here, Harris, Hardy, Rothwell, Grisham, Spivak are the last 5 for Tibura. Who's the best? Sergey Spivak's probably the best one on there because Harris is washed and Hardy's Greg Hardy.
Tibura hasn't beaten many good guys.
And then Volkov's got Gane, Overeem, Harris, same, and Hardy on there too, and Curtis Blades. So you can argue that he's lost against the top 3 in the division, but he's faced the top 3 in the division. For me, it's Volkov all the way here. Let's keep it moving. This is another interesting one. A guy that started so hot and then kind of fell off due to a bout with COVID. Of course, I'm talking about Khamzat Chimaev taking on the Leech, Li Jingliang. Chimaev, the second highest priced fighter on the card at 9,500. Second highest fight. Yep, second highest price fighter, 9,500. So the Leach is 6,700. Kamzat, of course, then second biggest favorite, minus 575. Lee plus 410. The odds to finish here are minus 270. Everyone seems to think Kamzat's just going to roll over him here, kind of in a similar way to Makachev, except the difference in my eyes is Kamzat actually throws and lands a ton more volume on the ground. He looks to ground and pound as opposed to submit you here. So that would tend to lead you to believe that maybe he could put up a big score here. Are you with that?
I guess. I mean, there's a lot of unknown here. I mean, obviously, the first thing you got to talk about is, Kamzat's health issues. He had a really tough battle with COVID. He was scheduled to fight Leon Edwards on multiple occasions. He had to withdraw a couple times because of the lingering effects of COVID. This will be his first fight since September 19th of last year, so you're talking, a little over 13 months or so. Our exposure to Kamzat has been extremely small, obviously. He's won each of his first 3 UFC fights. I think he was overhyped a little because he won those 3 fights in 66 days. Every time you turn around, he's blowing someone else out of the water. Mm-hmm. Those wins also came against lesser competition. That certainly has to be mentioned. And Lee's pretty good. Lee is certainly better than anyone Chimaev's faced to date by a considerable margin. He's 8-2 in his last 10 fights. Knocked out Santiago Ponzinibbio in January in a fight where I'm fairly sure he was an underdog. Lee has power. He's durable. He's been hit a bunch in his career. He's never been knocked out. I don't expect Chimaev to blow past Lee like he did some of his previous opponents. I guess we talk about this a lot. There's going to be a question whether Chimaev is fully healthy after everything he dealt with. If the guy's willing to step into the octagon, we don't know his financial situation. We don't know if he needs the money, whatever. If the guy's stepping in the octagon, I think we kind of just have to go with the assumption that he is fully healthy.
Mm-hmm. I saw through his agent, his plan is to fight, get vaccinated, and then come back to Vegas as soon as possible to get booked on.
I could see that. He hasn't fought in a long time, so if he makes relatively quick work of Lee and doesn't get into any, serious damage trouble, I can see him trying to get right back in there. The 3 fights we've seen him, he looked like the best fighter on the planet. But it came against lesser competition. The best win in that span was Gerald Michard, who's actually I kind of like and I think is pretty good. But, Lee's certainly better than he is.
Yeah, Michard moves around a lot.
Yeah, look, I don't hate getting minor exposure to Lee because, then you have the health questions with Chimaev. Then you have the other question of whether it's just him beating up lesser competition. So there are a couple things you can, put in Lee's favor where I don't think taking a stab or a Hail Mary at him is the worst thing in the world. I would say it's certainly more likely that Chimaev just runs him out of the building. Maybe not to the extent he did his other 3 opponents, but I think that's more likely. But look, again, this is a really, really big price for a guy that we don't have a ton of exposure to when it's coming off health. I don't love it. Put it that way. It seems like a lot of money for a guy with some concerns. I'm certainly not as confident as your typical 9,500 fighter would lead you to believe. You think it'd be Amanda Nunes, beating up, someone who has no chance, Felicia Spencer or whatever. It's certainly not on that level.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to say that Kamzat, I'm going to pick him, of course. And I'm going to give it a much higher degree of confidence than you are. And I'll try to say why quick. One, he can hit value. Now, granted, these opponents, 126.7, 122, 124 DraftKings points in each. So he can hit value at 9,500. And the big thing for me is Leach has a 59% takedown defense, which is probably below average, when you put in the whole scope of things. And Chimaev has a 4-inch reach and 2-inch height advantage here. Chimaev could fight at middleweight. To me, that would eventually, if he makes that move later in his career as he develops, could he become a 2-division champ? I don't want to crown him this early after 3 fights, but I love everything about Chimaev. He's, the bigger Makachev, except once he takes you down, he's going to throw elbows, he's going to throw fists, and it's a matter of how many you can eat from there. So it'll be a quick takedown. He'll grab a hold of him, and he won't even have to use technique. He's going to muscle Leach to the ground, and then it's going to be a matter of how long the referee lets Leach last. So it'll either be a gone in 60-second bonus or another 50 strikes for Khamzat bonus. Either way, it's going to be big. And I use Khamzat in my survivor pool. You mentioned, how do we actually know he's fully recovered from COVID? The answer is we don't necessarily. So that's the only little concern. So that makes it me pretty unlikely to just go, bet $1,000 on him as a minus 550 favorite. But for DraftKings purposes, I'm as confident in him as I am in anybody in the card. I think he's going to smash and just take care of business here. So that's my take on that one. One more fight on the main card to hit before we can maybe talk about other upsets or anything else we want to hit. Magomedon Kaliev against Volcan Ozdimir. Ozdimir 7,100 on DraftKings. Kaliev, I should have looked up how to pronounce that properly. 9,100. Kaliev minus 310 favorite. Comeback on Ozdimir plus 245. Odds to finish are minus 170. Man, I don't know if I'm just completely looking over Ozdimir here, but I can't think of a real single skill that Ozdimir has that can carry him to victory here. And I will also say that getting KO'd by Jiří Procházka changes a man if Ozdimir hadn't already been changed by the DC fight. But you have anything to add on to that? Is there any path to victory for Ozdimir?
Not really. Actually, I'm kind of no, I really don't. I mean, look, Volcan's always been a power puncher who is willing to take a shot to land two of his own. And there are a lot of guys like that. And if that's how you fight, you better have a good chin. And he doesn't, So look, I was talking about, this is the fight on the main card that I have the most confidence in. Magomed is really good. He knocked out Owan Kutilapa twice last year in a short span after some, antics in the first one. I've been out on Ozdimir for a while. His path to victory is so small that anybody he goes up against is going to know he can't compete in anything other than a kickboxing match. And the other thing is, even if he gets the kickboxing match that he's seeking, he has a questionable chin. It's a bad combination. It's a really bad combination in a higher weight class where a lot of the guys hit hard. It's a bad combination. So I'm out on Volcan. Have been for a while. This is the easiest pick on the main card.
Yeah, Volcan hasn't faced, a wrestler like Magomed here since he fought and lost to DC, and that was a very lopsided fight. I think Magomedon Kaliev, who averages 3.41 takedowns per 15 minutes, is going to be able to grab a hold of him and take him down. And even if he doesn't, it probably isn't the best game plan, but I would pick on Kaliev in a kickboxing match too. I think.
He has legit power too. Yeah. I mean, it's not what you want. Yeah, it's not what you want to do with Ozdimir simply because that is playing to his strength, which is his knockout power. But yeah, no, I think he can win everywhere.
No one caught me on that. It's 3.41 strikes landed per minute, significant strikes. Only 1.18 takedowns per 15 minutes. But I think a lot of that is because he hasn't had to use it. His shots land with so much power. And, I try to avoid the trap of like, am I making this pick so confidently because I'm completely out on Ozdimir and not in enough on Ankalaev? I don't know. I've seen enough out of Ankalaev.
Nah, this one's pretty straightforward.
Competition. So, I guess that brings us to the question here. We've got all these favorites, and yeah, I know we kind of chickened out and picked all the favorites here, but I truly believe that is what's going to happen here. And, we at least highlighted some underdogs that have some DraftKings viability here. But my question is, if you had to pick three fighters, for a survivor pool or do a confidence ranking 1, 2, 3 out of the 6 fights we just talked about. So you're picking 3 for a survivor pool or just like your 3 that you're most confident are going to win. How do you rank these guys?
Yeah, we were talking about this before we went on the air. This is a good question. Jesus. I'd actually probably have Ankalaev first. I have no confidence in Volcan, so that would be number 1 for me. God, the rest is close. I guess I'd probably go Makachev second because I'm a believer in the wrestling. And I mean, if Dan Hooker can somehow stay upright and beat Makachev on the feet, then, God bless him and more power to him. So, I guess that would probably be second for me. And, the other 3, I'm going to chicken out. The other 3 are all.
You were pretty much on Volkov, right?
Yeah, he'd probably be the third, but, I'm kind of going with the lesser with that question, I'm going with the lesser competition. As far as the opposition, like I think there's a gap, at least for Volkov and Tibura, and for Ankalaev and Ozdimir. I think Tibura and Ozdimir are probably the two weakest fighters on the main card. So if you look at it that way, I'd probably go with their opposition. I'm just from just a basic skills standpoint, I think Himaev's certainly in there. I'm just still a little worried about the health issues and the inactivity.
Yep.
I'm not, Sandhagen. If Corey Sandhagen won, I wouldn't be totally shocked. If Glover Teixeira won, I wouldn't be totally shocked. I'd be pretty surprised if Volkov lost. I'd be really shocked if Ankalaev lost. And then, the other ones are kind of a toss-up.
Yeah, I'm going to be pretty spicy with mine. I'm going to say number one is Khamzat. I have the most confident in Khamzat Chimaev going out and smashing Leach. Leach is certainly a step up, but not nearly big enough of a step up. I mean, they were going to have Khamzat fight Leon Edwards, if that gives you any indication here of where they're at. So Khamzat number one, and Kaliev number two for me, because, I think we're both just out on Ozdimir at that point. And number three, I know Glover's been spicy as an underdog, but I'm taking Jan Blachowicz, the Polish power, to get it done here. I think Father Time catches up with Teixeira. I think Blachowicz lands and rocks him and does not make the same mistake of Thiago Santos and actually puts him away after he touches him. So those are my three. I think Hooker's a little bit live. I can't pick a guy. I'm not going to be as bold as to pick a plus 450 dog straight up here, but he's a little bit live and just because Makachev's more of a decision fighter, I think, every round starts standing. That's so cliche. Every round starts standing. And Hooker, I've just seen his resiliency. He's earned my respect in person, that one time. And I just can't let that go. He's an animal. I don't care if he loses in 10 seconds. I mean, doing what he did, I don't know, I'm sure a lot of our listeners heard the story. Last time he fought, what did he have to do? Quarantine 30, 35 days, whatever it is, both ways, before, after, couldn't see his wife, couldn't see his kid, all that stuff. Yeah, you don't hear him complain much either.
No, you never hear him complain. The only time he complains is when he couldn't get his visa to go fight. You never hear him complain. He's a good guy. And I think we talked about Khamzat, I think it's going to go one of two ways. I think it's either going to be he's going to kind of struggle and he'll win probably and just be like, God, what's all the fuss about? He just beat up three lesser guys. He had a problem with the best guy he's faced to date. Or kind of the camp you're in where we're going to be looking at it when it's all said and done and say, oh, God, this guy's a freak. This is one of the five best fighters in the roster today.
He's going to steamroll. He's going to steamroll him, get one more top contender fight, and then we're talking about a title shot for Khamzat. I'm pretty confident.
I mean, if you're one of the, if you're the betting type, God, I mean, minus 575 is just such a huge price to pay. You're looking at like laying $1,800 or so to win 300. It's so risky.
I'm not making a straight up bet on that money line, and I'm definitely not advising that. But he's definitely, for me, he's a good, good DraftKings play. Khamzat by TKO KO is plus 150 on the DraftKings Sportsbook.
I don't hate that because he can get him to the ground, just pound the crap out of him.
I like that a whole lot.
Yeah.
Actually, that's the bet that I think
nothing wrong with that
is the play here. And we got two more betting columns coming to the site on RotoWire this week from Chris and Cole, so they'll have you covered too. Real quick, I mean, big card. Any other possible underdogs stand out for you? Anybody? You think might have a shot, you're going to have to pick some to be able to field a lineup here,
So there was
the spot, what do you got?
Yeah, there was one that when I was looking at it kind of stood out to me. And that is, I'm thinking about again, fading Amanda Hibas. God, sorry. Yeah, this we did not talk about this ahead of time.
So at least that's a good sign. We can come together on one.
She's 8,200. Verna Jandiroba is 8,000. Amanda Hibas, her most recent fight came in January. She lost to Marina Rodriguez via second round knockout. Now, Marina Rodriguez is actually pretty good. Better than I would have guessed her. She would have been, but there's not a ton. Amanda Hibas has been hyped pretty good. There's not a ton in her background. For example, take a look at her 4 UFC wins. She submitted Emily Whitmire, who I'm pretty sure was released not all that long
I
ago.
think she's gone.
She took a unanimous decision from Mackenzie Dern.
That's the best one.
It is the best one. She defeated Ronda Marcos, who is probably one of the most up and down fighters in the history of the UFC. Mm-hmm. And then she submitted Paige Van Zandt, and we know what Paige Van Zandt's doing now. So there seems to be some value on Virna. Now, she's coming off she was dropped a unanimous decision from Kenzie Dern. But Jandiroba is a pure mat specialist. She has 19 career MMA wins. 13 of the 19 have come via submission. It just seems like a halfway decent price. If you can get her at plus 150 and 8,000, and really, I mean, typically, if you have a plus 150 underdog, their DK or plus 140 underdog, their DK salary is usually less than 8,000. Mm-hmm. But, that's the consequence of having a 15th fight card. So she's one I thought about. The other one I thought was a decent fight or a decent play was Ricardo Ramos, 7,900. He's also plus 150. I didn't hate that one. Other than that, there were not a ton I was crazy about. Makwan Amir Kami was a little interesting because I know he's a talented guy. It's just I like Lerone Murphy too. So Lerone Murphy's really good. I mean, 6,900 for Amir Kami is cheap. He's like essentially a punt play to fit at the very end of your lineup, and he has a couple impressive wins. He's been pretty good, but I wouldn't pick him to win it. He has some wins, but fading Hibas at first look was the underdog play that I like the most.
Yeah, I mean, looking at like the fight metrics, all their metrics that they use to kind of determine strength of record. It had Jandiroba, predicted as better, I think, in most of those. And you're right, I think Hibas gets a little bit of steam from the hype train. She's a big prospect, just has a good future, but Jandiroba is no slouch, and she's been strong lately. She's been dominant in a couple of her wins. So I agree there. And yeah, sure. I mean, the other one, Mr. Finland, and then we're getting into some huge favorites here, on the undercard too. So originally DraftKings flipped Gamzatov and Oleschuk, but then flip that back. So I guess you maybe look at a big guy fight there if you need some value. We post all the odds to finish in our RotoWire DFS lineup optimizer. I'm looking at that right now. Their money line, their win percentage, their odds to finish, projections from Chris Olsen are on there. We've got all the info you need to make and group players together and mass enter lineups and help. There's a 500K MMA special with $100,000 to first this week. So we've got all the tools covered for you here. That's going to about wrap things up here for us. I don't have too much other housekeeping to do here. Thanks everyone for listening to the RotoWire MMA podcast. Oh yeah, Friday Fight IQ is coming back. I know it feels like it's been forever since the last pay-per-view, but Joe and Sean are going to have a special guest on Friday that they're going to be revealing later on in the week. So stay tuned for that on the RotoWire YouTube channel, this same channel. Appreciate it if you smash the like button and subscribe. I guess I got to say that because we're on YouTube now. And once again, John is at JonLitterine. You got hockey season on too, so you're a busy man.
I am, and what we're going to be talking again next week, right?
Yeah, probably this time next week. I will have to see if Tuesday's the day or not. But again, give me a follow at Roto Jake. We're going to be back, next week. UFC 268, Usman versus Covington. Another great card. That one's from Madison Square Garden. You're going to try to sneak over for that one?
Nah, man. I was there last night for the Ranger game. They got slaughtered. I'm going to wait a little while to go back to the Garden.
You need to give yourself a little pause from that.
Yeah, I mean, the Rangers are 4-2 this year or whatever. They got slaughtered both times I went. I'm staying away from the Garden for a while.
Yeah, I don't follow hockey. My brother's a Blackhawks fan, so I guess it could be worse.
Yeah, a lot going on in Blackhawk world these days.
Yeah. All right, but we got you covered for everything at RotoWire, rotowire.com/try. Free 10-day trial. 4 major sports going on simultaneously. That doesn't happen all that often. We got all your optimizers, all your fantasy season-long needs, all your NFL needs, all your MMA needs. We got you everything over here. No credit card with that trial. Hopefully you check us out. Thanks again for making it this far and listening to the show, and we'll be back with you next week.
Let's do it.